What was she hiding before the wedding? The woman standing at my doorstep that morning wasn't the mail carrier or the wedding florist. She wore an ivory suit, her hair neatly pinned up as if heading to a boardroom meeting, her eyes sharp as a razor. Beside her was a stranger clutching a black leather briefcase, silent like a shadow in the background. I was still holding a half-used mascara wand when the doorbell rang for the third time. "Emma, I think it's best we sign some paperwork before the wedding." Karen, Daniel's mother, said, her voice devoid of greetings or smiles. I froze. 100 scenarios flashed through my mind, but none were like this. No one had mentioned a postnuptial agreement 3 days before the wedding. Before I tell you the rest of the story, from that contract to the 3 apartments I never revealed to the things I chose to hide, please do me a small favor. Leave a comment with your name and where you're from. I want to know who I'm sharing this story with. And if you've ever cared about family, the secrets behind closed doors, or the choice between love and trust, don't forget to follow the channel. Because this story, it's far from over. A few days earlier, I sat by the window on the 18th floor of a small Brooklyn apartment, watching the flickering streaks of cars under the evening lights. My wedding dress hung carefully in the corner, shimmering like a promise. Daniel, my fiancé, was teaching at NYU, and I, Emma, 26 financial analyst, had just ignored a call from my future mother-in-law, claiming I was busy picking out wedding flowers. It's not that I hated her. It's just I knew she didn't really like me. This story probably began years ago, but the most important part started when my grandmother, the woman with moonlit smiling eyes, passed away and left me a will. I was the heir to 3 apartments in the heart of New York. One in Queens, near the small park where I used to bike as a kid. Another in the Lower East Side, where I lived through college. And one too beautiful for me to step into often in the Upper West Side, with glass windows overlooking Central Park. All were in my name. All were unknown to anyone except my grandmother's private lawyer. I didn't tell Daniel. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I feared history repeating itself in the cruel way I'd seen my mother endure. My mother had married a wealthy man, and she'd been labeled a lucky gold digger by his family. I still remember that first dinner at my grandparents' house. My mother wore a gray sweater, sitting silently while my grandmother threw veiled insults. Back in my day, I was poor too, but at least I didn't choose to marry rich and sit idle. My father didn't defend her, and my mother just smiled a bitter smile I'll never forget. In the end, she took me and left that house, returning to New York, working 2 jobs to raise me. From the age of 11, my grandmother became my closest confidant, teaching me to stand on my own 2 feet. She always said, "Emma, you can love anyone. But make sure you don't need anyone to survive." When she passed, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't sad, but because I knew she'd prepared me in her own way. 2 weeks after her funeral, her lawyer called me. He handed me a thin folder with 3 property deeds, lease agreements, and a bank account with steady rental income. "Keep it private," he said. I nodded, and from that day I became an independent woman who kept 3 apartments hidden from the man about to become her husband. Back to that morning when Karen knocked. I invited her in, pouring tea out of polite habit. The man with her sat down, opened his briefcase, and pulled out a stack of documents. The smell of fresh paper and ink made me dizzy. "This is a post-nuptial agreement," Karen said. "We all know assets are the leading cause of marital disputes. It's best to be clear from the start." I flipped through the pages. The wife confirms she has no personal assets as of the signing date. If I signed, I'd be agreeing that everything, including what I already owned, could become joint property. I gave a faint smile. "I won't sign anything until Daniel knows." "Of course," she replied, but her eyes were sharp as needles. 3 days later, the wedding happened. It rained lightly in the morning, but golden sunlight broke through by afternoon. I walked down the aisle of white flowers, my mother's hand trembling as she gave me to Daniel. He looked at me as if the world held only one truth: we belonged together. No one mentioned the contract. No one knew I carried 3 apartments in a heart, trembling with love. We exchanged rings, exchanged vows. And as the music played, I looked up and thought, love is enough, isn't it? I didn't expect to hear that doorbell again just a week after the wedding. Honestly, I thought I'd earned a moment's rest. After months of wedding planning, meeting deadlines, and navigating my mother-in-law's sensitivity, I thought I'd reached a place of peace. But that Saturday morning's doorbell, steady, patient, unrelenting, signaled that nothing was over. In fact, it might just be starting. I pulled back the living room curtain and peeked out. My heart clenched. It was her. Again. My mother-in-law, Linda, stood at the door wearing a beige trench coat, clutching her purse as if heading to a shareholder meeting. Beside her was a different man, not the one from before, but his gray suit, thin glasses, and black briefcase screamed notary. I didn't open the door right away. For a moment I considered pretending I wasn't home, but the bell rang again, longer, more insistent. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and told myself, "Stay calm, Emma." Refusing isn't a crime. Linda walked in without waiting for an invitation, heading straight to the living room, as if it were her own space. I was used to it by now. Anywhere her son was, she assumed she had a right to enter. I offered the notary a seat. He gave a slight nod, avoiding my gaze. Emma Linda began placing her hand on a stack of papers. We all know marriage isn't just about two people, it's about two foundations. Emotionally, you and Daniel may be compatible, but financially, there need to be clear boundaries. I didn't respond. I just looked at her. Last week, when I brought the contract you refused to sign, I understand it was sudden. But now, after the wedding, things are more settled. We can proceed seriously. She pushed the papers toward me. My hands trembled slightly as I took them. Though I'd anticipated the contents, the first line still made my breath catch. Confirmation. The wife has no separate personal assets as of the marriage date. Any assets acquired post-marriage are joint, unless legally declared otherwise. This wasn't just an agreement. It was a legal trap. I closed the papers gently and looked at Linda. For a long time. I'd prefer not to sign anything without Daniel here. Why? She raised an eyebrow. Don't you trust your mother-in-law? It's not about trust. This is a major decision, a contract about assets. I think a husband and wife should decide together. The air grew colder by a few degrees. The notary clasped his hands silent. Linda gave a half smile I'd come to know well. You're reacting so strongly. Is there something you haven't disclosed? I felt like cold water had been splashed on me, but I didn't let it show. I'm not hiding anything, I said calmly. But that's exactly why I want Daniel here when signing something that could impact our relationship long term. Linda crossed her arms, her voice light as air. You don't understand. This is to protect both of you. I've seen couples divorce and fight over assets until they couldn't even look at each other. Or maybe you saw a woman left with nothing after a divorce. I wanted to ask, but held back. Caution was necessary, but control disguised as care wasn't. I stood, saying gently, Mother, if Daniel agrees, I'll consider it. But today, I won't sign anything. Linda stood too. Her smile was gone. Fine, but don't say I didn't give you a chance to clarify things early. She signaled the notary to stand. He nodded at me, his eyes slightly apologetic. As they left, I exhaled, but only for a second, because at that moment the sound of a key turning in the lock echoed. The door opened. Daniel stepped in. He was holding a bag of bread and 2 coffees. His eyes landed on me, then shifted to Linda, then to the stranger passing through the hallway. He frowned and asked, What's going on here? Some questions seem small, but answering them wrong can shatter an entire relationship. Daniel wasn't the type to lose his cool. He was so calm I used to think if the world collapsed, he'd stand there hands in pockets, asking, You okay? But that morning when he walked into the apartment and saw his mother leaving with me standing there unable to hide my tension, he couldn't ignore it. He set the bread on the table still in his coat. What's going on, Emma? I glanced at the door where Linda's heels had just faded toward the elevator. Taking a breath, I kept my voice steady. Your mom came with a notary, brought a postnuptial agreement. Daniel's brow furrowed. You mean after we're already married? I nodded. He was silent for a few seconds, then pulled out his phone and called her. Mom, I just got home. What's this about a postnuptial agreement? I stood behind him, hands lightly clasped. I couldn't hear her clearly, but her voice sounded sharper than usual. Daniel listened patiently, not interrupting. At the end, he said, I understand you're worried, but we're married now. I don't think this is the right time. I'll call you back later. He hung up. His blue eyes met mine, a mix of irritation and unease. I spoke first. I refused to sign. I think I have the right to. He sat down, hand on his forehead. This is absurd. Mom knows I don't want anything to do with that kind of division. What do we even have to fight over? I gave a bitter smile. Maybe because she thinks one day there might be something worth fighting for. Daniel looked up at me. Emma, you don't need to worry. I won't force you to sign anything, and neither should she. I felt like I could breathe again, but at the same time a wave of unease rose. If he asked more, would I tell the truth? I stayed silent, partly because I wasn't ready, partly because I feared if I revealed the 3 apartments my refusal to sign would be misinterpreted not as principle, but as hiding wealth. I chose silence, still believing I was protecting our relationship, not deceiving him. Daniel took my hand gently. I won't let Mom interfere in our lives. I promise. But I didn't expect the story to continue. 3 days later, a colleague sent me a text. Was that your mother-in-law at the office this week? Looked like someone from your wedding. I froze. I checked the building's entry cameras. Sure enough, Linda had visited, but she didn't meet me. It seemed she just wanted to confirm where I worked. A chill ran down my spine. At the same time, Daniel started getting more frequent calls from his mother. Sometimes just checking in, sometimes wondering if your wife needs investment advice, or even... She sent me a lengthy email with 3 articles about the dangers of financial opacity in modern marriages. I held back. Daniel tried to mediate, but things were growing exhausting. One evening as I cleaned the kitchen, Daniel stepped in, his voice soft. I'm sorry. I know Mom's crossing lines. Can you give me a little time to talk to her directly? I nodded, but deep down I knew things were slipping out of control. We still went on dates, shared small moments. But in Daniel's eyes, I saw something shifting. Not distrust, but a struggle between 2 sides, his mother and his wife. Linda, who raised him, taught him, placed expectations on him. Me, the woman he chose to spend his life with. And I grew more anxious. Would love, alone, be enough to keep him by my side when everything felt like fog? A week later, Daniel invited Linda for dinner to talk, face to face. Ben. I prepared a simple meal pan, seared salmon salad, and a chilled bottle of white wine. Linda arrived on time. Though her face wasn't as stern, she still carried that just cool enough demeanor. Daniel spoke first. Mom, I think it's time we're clear. Emma and I don't need any contracts. We married because we trust each other, and I hope you respect that. Linda set her fork down, tilting her head. I understand. But don't you think you should prepare for the future? Someone in finance like Emma must know the risks. Her words cut like... I responded calmly. I believe if you start with doubt, any marriage could crumble. Linda smiled a smile that didn't hide its hurt. I'm just looking out for my son. But if you're both decided, I won't push. The evening ended in silence. No arguments, but no reconciliation either. After that, Linda stopped coming by. No more calls as frequent as before. Daniel didn't say much, but I saw him grow quieter when her messages came through. I understood. He was caught between 2 women, and I didn't want to pull him to either side. But I also knew the storm hadn't passed. It was only gathering strength. Control doesn't always mean shouting or pointing fingers. Sometimes it's just a look, a seemingly harmless question repeated enough to make you doubt yourself. 3 weeks after that dinner, there were no more big arguments, but nothing felt truly peaceful either. Linda didn't visit as often, but she appeared at the most unexpected moments. One Thursday afternoon, post-Zoom meeting, the doorbell rang. It was Linda holding a fruit basket and a thick manila envelope. Just stopping by, she said lightly. Brought some company documents for you to look over if you have time. I frowned slightly, but took the envelope. Inside were balance sheets, business reports, and an investment proposal for the family's transportation company, which she partly owned. It was clear, though, unspoken, she wanted me to invest, or at least offer professional input. I didn't respond immediately, just smiled. I'll look when I'm free. Linda nodded and stood to leave, but at the door she turned back. Oh, I heard stocks in Queens are surging. Anyone in the family investing there? The question seemed casual, but Queens was where I owned one of my apartments, one of the 3 I'd never disclosed. That night, I told Daniel about it. He sighed. Maybe she just wants you to feel like part of the family. She doesn't mean harm. I didn't reply, not out of anger, because I knew he was trying to balance things. But balancing didn't reassure me. It only felt like walking a tightrope between my untold truth and recruiting questions. Linda started calling every Monday morning, asking Daniel if she could help organize paperwork. In those calls, she casually asked me saving up separately to write a safety net smile in case Daniel needs to keep it. Any bonuses at your firm was critical. I heard finance jobs are getting cuts. Ever thought about co-investing in a Long Island venture? I know people did. Each question sounded reasonable, caring even, but together they wove an invisible, suffocating web of pressure. Daniel started losing sleep. I knew because I'd wake at night to find him staring at the ceiling. When I asked, he'd say work stress. Just a bit overwhelming. But I knew it wasn't just work. He was torn between his mother and me, afraid one misstep could break everything. One evening, as we washed dishes, he asked, "Do you think Mom's meddling too much?" I paused, then answered softly, "I think she's doing what she believes is right. But it makes me feel like an extension of the family, not an individual." Daniel nodded. "I'm sorry, I'll talk to her more clearly. I just don't want more tension." I placed my hand on his, squeezing gently. I understood. But tension doesn't vanish by avoiding it. One Saturday I returned from the grocery store to find Linda in the kitchen with Daniel sorting papers on the dining table. Back already, she smiled. Just helping Daniel with bills, organizing what's paid, what's not into a folder for convenience. I nodded, staying calm. But seeing our joint bank statement among the papers, I felt violated. That night alone with Daniel, I asked, "You let her see all our accounts?" He frowned. I didn't give her anything. She probably saw papers mixed with the bills. I cut in, not loud, but firm. "Daniel finances are private for a couple. I need you to understand not everyone gets to touch that." Daniel leaned back, sighing. "I don't know what to do, Emma. You're the woman I love. She's the woman who raised me. I'm tired of choosing every day." My heart sank as I looked at him. I knew he loved me, but I also knew Linda was a force in his life, and I, the daughter-in-law hiding assets, couldn't keep playing the perfect victim. That night alone in my study, I stared at the screen rental income statements from my 3 apartments, all performing well. Part of me felt proud, the other part afraid. If Linda knew, she wouldn't stop at investment suggestions. She'd want control to insert herself into every decision, claiming family means sharing, when what she really wanted was power. I looked at the numbers and for the first time felt my once independent assets could be taken from me, if I wasn't careful. Truth doesn't always burst into the light with a bang. Sometimes it just takes a stranger's casual greeting, and everything starts to crack. I thought I could control everything, or at least the balance between past and present, what I kept private and what I shared. But one call, one innocuous question, shattered it all. That morning, I was fixing a stray lock of hair after rushing to the office. My colleague, Katie, poked her head in. "Emma, someone's asking for you at reception. Says they're a real estate agent, recognized you from somewhere." I frowned and walked out. A man in his 40s, polished in a suit, smiled politely. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "I'm Marcus from Saville Real Estate. Just confirming a small detail." I almost interrupted, but courtesy made me nod. "I handled a transaction for an apartment at 115 West 86th Street, Upper West Side 2 years ago. Owner was Emma, the same name as you. I remember because you wore a white fur collared coat at the signing. Very striking." I stood still, my cheeks warming. He continued, oblivious to the storm rising in me. "A former client asked if that apartment's on the market. Just checking if you're the Emma Lowe working here." I forced a stiff smile. "Thanks, but I'm not looking to sell." I turned away quickly, saying nothing more. But some things speak for you when you stay silent. I didn't know who his former client was, but from that moment my secret began to fracture. 3 days later, Linda called Daniel, her tone odd. "Do you know Emma owned an apartment on West 86th? I'm not sure. Why do you ask? Just something a real estate acquaintance mentioned. Same name, same address, same company." "Think there's another person like that?" Daniel went quiet. I knew because he asked me right after Emma, "Are you hiding something from me?" I wished I could deny it. I wished I could go back to day one and bravely tell all. But I only had one choice. I nodded silently as if peeling back a layer I'd hidden too long. Not just one Daniel. 3. Left to me by my grandmother. I didn't tell you before we married because I was afraid. He said nothing for 10 seconds that felt longer than an hour. I looked down feeling like a criminal confessing. I was afraid you'd see me differently if you knew, that our love would feel conditional. I saw my mother despised by her in-laws for having wealth before marriage. I didn't want that history to repeat. Daniel sat, hands clenched. You hid this from me for 2 years. I didn't deceive you. I paid taxes fully. I didn't use that money for us. I kept it separate to protect our marriage. I didn't know how he'd react. But what I didn't expect was that he didn't walk away. He looked up, voice hoarse. Emma, what hurts isn't that you have money. It's that you didn't trust me. My heart tightened. I need time to process this, but I love you. And I won't let Mom meddle in this anymore. I wanted to cry, not from relief, but because I knew I'd kept this man, though I wasn't sure I deserved him. But the storm wasn't over. The next evening, Linda emailed Daniel subject family meeting. No explanation, just a request to meet at her house that weekend. I knew what awaited, and I wasn't wrong. The living room that day wasn't just Linda. Daniel's father, Matthew, was there, quiet, but commanding. Linda's sister, Carol, wore a silk scarf tied high like a badge of authority. A few relatives from the wedding sat in a row, like an uninvited advisory board. Daniel sat beside me, holding my hand tightly. I knew he was worried, but now I didn't need worry. I needed to stay sharp. Linda spoke, first her voice steady, as if reading shareholder minutes. Emma, we're here because of the surprise you brought. 3 apartments, not a word shared. The family deserves to know, at least to understand who you really are. I didn't smile, not out of fear, but because I knew I couldn't soften anything anymore. I took a deep breath, my voice soft but clear. All that property was legally inherited from my grandmother before Daniel and I married. I declared it fully in tax records, all independent paperwork. I broke no laws or ethics. Carol snorted. The issue isn't legality, it's secrecy. Marriage is about sharing, not playing hide and seek. I shared love, honesty, responsibility. But personal assets, especially tied to my past and security, aren't required to be public, especially when they could be misjudged. Linda leaned back, eyes icy. You argue well. Daniel stood, his voice firm as a driven stake, Mom enough. Emma did nothing wrong. If you think love needs financial conditions, I'm sorry I wasn't raised to believe that. A minute of silence enveloped the room. Then Matthew, silent till now, spoke. Lo, Daniel, son, we're not attacking. But we can't ignore this. You need to understand divorce, without clear divisions, gets messy legally and morally. I turned to him, my voice trembling not from fear, but from layered emotions. I don't think divorce is a destination to plan for from the start. If the family thinks my love for Daniel is an investment scheme, then maybe I was never truly part of this family. A relative spoke. If it's all legal, prove it. Deeds, tax filings, financials. I pulled prepared copies from my bag ready for the worst-case scenario. I laid them neatly on the table. Here's the notarized inheritance contract. Here's 3 years of tax filings, all transparent. I owe no one in this room an apology for being loved and trusted by my grandmother. Linda scanned the papers without touching them. Legal proof isn't trust, Emma, I replied calmly. Trust shouldn't be demanded from those you never trusted to begin with. Daniel placed a hand on my shoulder. I'm proud of you. You don't need to say more. The room split into 2 camps. Some relatives nodded lightly, others avoided my gaze. Linda gripped her chair, then stood abruptly. If my son chooses this woman, so be it. But don't expect me to see her as my daughter, Daniel replied curtly. Then don't. We left to the sound of rain pattering outside. Daniel opened the car door for me. Before getting in, I glanced back at the house, a place I'd never truly belonged to. I didn't feel hate, just a permanent void confirmed by their own words. That night back at our apartment, Daniel sank onto the sofa. I stood in the living room feeling like I was at a crossroads. My apartment's on one side, the man I fought for on the other, and a new path ahead, its destination unknown. Daniel spoke softly. We can't live like this forever. I sat beside him. I know. Mom won't stop. The closer she gets, the more she controls. You don't deserve to live under surveillance. I turned to him. We could move, find a place no one knows, start over, own our space. He smiled for the first time that day. I think it's time. Some loves don't need words. Just stand still in the rain, look one way long enough, and you'll touch another's heart. I never thought rain could soften me. To me, rain was a nuisance, slowing schedules, wetting hair, making my 3-year-old Paul prone to colds. But that afternoon, rain made me freeze at the preschool gate, my heart racing from something unexpected. Linda. She stood across the street 10 meters from the gate, no umbrella, no raincoat. Just her old trench coat, soaked dark hair, plastered shoes muddied. Her eyes fixed on the small playground where Paul laughed on a red plastic slide. I stood rooted, unable to breathe evenly. An hour earlier, I'd left work early to pick up Paul as usual. Daniel had afternoon classes, so pickup was my routine. We'd moved to a new apartment in the eastern suburbs, smaller but quiet safe, and most importantly, no surprise knocks. After that family meeting, things with Linda froze. No calls, no emails, no texts. Even Daniel grew quieter when I mentioned his mother. I didn't blame him. Everyone heals in their own way. But I didn't expect Linda's way of healing to be standing alone in the rain like this. I approached without speaking, my heart torn between wariness and an inexplicable pang of pity. Paul's teacher appeared beside me, also watching Linda. Her voice was a near whisper. "She's been here since 2 p.m., just standing." I asked, and she said, "I'm not going in. I just want to see my grandson for a bit." I turned to her. "You know she's just a guess." Paul has her eyes the blue the way he furrows his brow when annoyed. Kids can't hide their blood. I pursed my lips. That simple remark tightened my chest. Paul slid off the slide, saw me, and shouted, "Mommy!" I waved. That's when Linda turned her eyes, meeting mine, a flash of surprise. Then she looked down like a child caught doing something she didn't dare admit. I don't know why, but I walked over. Why not take shelter in the school? Linda looked at me, her voice low. I wasn't sure. "You'd want to see me." I didn't answer right away. Wind whipped rain across my hair. Water on Linda's cheeks blurred with something else. She continued, "I miss him. No excuse to visit, so I just watch." I stayed silent. The teacher's words echoed. "I just want to see my grandson for a bit." Suddenly, my walls of defense began to crack, though I didn't want them to collapse entirely. Paul ran up, hugging my leg, then looked at Linda and chirped, "Grandma." That call, like a gentle touch, dissolved the tension among us 3 adults. Linda knelt her trembling hand on Paul's shoulder. "Hello, my love. I'm sorry I haven't visited in a while." Paul nodded, unfazed, as I'd expected. Kids have strange memories. They don't recall everything, but they remember feelings. I stood still, letting the moment unfold in silence. We took Paul home by taxi, the rain relentless. Linda sat in front, Paul and I in back. He babbled about school snacks from his teacher, a black cat on the classroom windowsill. Linda listened silently, her eyes, glistening lips tight. At home, I hesitated, then said, "Would you like to come up for tea?" Linda looked stunned, a beat. Then she nodded. "If it's not a bother." It wasn't. I just needed time to learn to accept that some enter our lives imperfectly, but aren't wholly worth shutting out. Chamomile tea was poured in silence. Linda scanned the new apartment, smaller, humbler than before. She noticed Paul's drawing on the wall, his tiny shoes by the door, the rocking chair where I read him bedtime stories. She said, not meeting my eyes, "Your home is so warm." I set my cup down. I wanted to keep things simple. Linda nodded slightly. "I understand. Maybe I was too harsh before. I just feared Daniel wasn't clear-eyed in love. Turns out you were the clearest." I didn't reply. For the first time, I didn't need to counter or defend. Linda sipped her tea, then looked at me slowly. "If you don't want to forgive, I understand. But I hope I can try again, at least with Paul." I looked at her. For the first time, her eyes held no calculation. No judgment, just a simple yearning to be part of a child's life. I nodded. I'll give you a chance. On one condition. Linda blinked. What's that? No interference. No control. If you want to be Paul's grandma, be someone he loves naturally, not someone arranged. She nodded. I promise. Some advice doesn't shout across life, but lies quiet on old paper. Yet when needed, it finds a way to speak at the right time. Right place, right listener. I found the letter one Sunday morning tidying the bookshelf in our new apartment, partly to make the space neater, partly to clear my own heart. This apartment was smaller than the last. No park view or open kitchen, but it had something the old one didn't piece. We'd been here 3 months. Paul adjusted to his reading nook, toy piano, and little wagon on the balcony, his sunshine cart every afternoon. I crouched, pulling the bottom drawer of a low wooden cabinet. A dusty cardboard box taped shut 2 years ago caught my eye. Scrawled in my marker Grandma's old books. I meant to leave it, thinking I lacked time to read faded words. But a pale yellow paper peeking from the edge stopped me. I pulled it out, a small envelope handwritten in my grandmother's bold, slanted script. I didn't recall her sending me letters. When she passed, I got her diary. But this was a complete surprise. I opened it, holding a cream-colored sheet, still scented with the lavender she loved. Dear Emma, life will give you many things: love, opportunity, trust, and loss. But you don't need to keep everything. Just 2. Protect what you're given. And remember, kindness is the greatest legacy a woman leaves the world. When you're tired of holding strong, try softening a bit. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's how you avoid becoming like those who hurt you. Love, Grandma. I don't know how long I sat after reading. Only that tears fell, not in torrents, not in sobs, but slowly, like rain soaking earth. Her words were quiet, but sank deep. I'd done the first part, well protected what I was given her legacy, my dignity, Daniel. But the second part, I'd forgotten kindness, trading it for vigilance. I realized my fear of control had made me brace like a warrior, forgetting I was also a mother, a wife, a woman, who needed to soften too. That night I shared the letter with Daniel. He listened without interrupting his eyes, sad not from the letter, but because he saw me truly lighten for the first time. I want to open up more, I said. Not because Linda's changed, but because I'm choosing not to be tense anymore. He nodded. I think Mom's waiting for that too. I hesitated. Can we let her see Paul more, but with boundaries? I still need a safe distance. Daniel squeezed my hand. We'll do what's best for all 3, especially Paul. From the next week, Linda came Wednesdays. Not to stay, not to decide, just to visit, play, and leave. The first time she brought an old fairy tale book Daniel loved as a child. Paul listened, enthralled, eyes bright. I stood in the kitchen, washing glasses, hearing her steady voice. Once upon a time there was a clever but lonely fox. I smiled, not forced, not reluctant. For the first time in ages, the smile came naturally, like light slipping through a window at dusk. Linda asked, less observed, more. No more money talk, no touching papers or discussing investments. Instead, she asked what colors Paul liked, if he feared shots, if he could eat eggs yet. I stayed cautious, but didn't lock the door. One evening, Paul showed me a colored drawing. Me and Grandma made this. Like my cat Mom, I hugged him, whispering, I love everything you make with love. When someone falls, you can turn away or step closer, not because the past deserves forgiveness, but because the present needs a hand to hold. I was feeding Paul a snack when the phone rang. Carol's number 1 I hadn't saved, but recognized instantly. Emma Linda had a stroke. She's in emergency prepping for surgery. Doctors say it's urgent. I set the spoon down, chilled. Which hospital? She gave the address. I didn't wait a second, calling Daniel to watch Paul, then rushed out as if the world were collapsing beneath me. On the way, my thoughts were a tangled mess, shock, worry, and a vague fear. Not of losing someone close. Linda and I were never close in the true sense, but that we hadn't fixed anything yet. I arrived as the doctor updated us. Linda had a stroke from prolonged high blood pressure with signs of a small brain bleed. Emergency surgery was needed, costing around $30,000, plus follow-up tests. Carol looked at me hesitant. Daniel doesn't have cash on hand. Matthew's in Florida. I can't cover it immediately. Emma, can you... I didn't answer right away, just stared through the foggy glass where Linda lay, motionless, her once firm hands limp by the bed. I thought of her visits, her probing financial questions, her sharp words like knives, the judgmental looks. Then I thought of her eyes in the rain watching Paul, her voice reading fairy tales, her clumsy first apology at our house. I just feared my son would suffer. I nodded. I'll cover the hospital bill. Now, when the doctor confirmed the payment, they wheeled Linda into surgery. I sat in the hallway, my heart heavy as stone. Part of me hadn't forgiven her, but another part learned you don't need to fully forgive to do what's right. Daniel arrived as surgery began, sitting beside me, gripping my hand, as if he were the one trembling. You paid, I nodded. I didn't think, I just did. He squeezed my hand. Thank you. I leaned my head on his shoulder, whispering, not for her, for you, for Paul. And for me, I don't want to live knowing I turned away when someone truly needed saving. 4 hours later, the doctor emerged. Surgery was successful. Linda was awake but needed close monitoring for 48 hours. No clear prognosis yet, but initial responses were positive. I exhaled. Daniel bowed his head, hands clasped like a pardoned man. Carol took my hand. Thank you, Emma, truly. I just smiled. 2 days later, I returned to the hospital. Linda was awake, weak, but speaking softly and moving one hand slightly. Daniel stood by her bed, but when I entered, he stepped out quietly, leaving 2 women face to face, no interpreter. Linda looked at me, her eyes different, no suspicion, no rigidity, just wet like a lake after rain. Emma, her voice a breathy whisper. I didn't think you'd come. I sat, keeping just enough distance. Who wouldn't come when family's on the line? Her eyes welled. I'm sorry. I looked up. For what? For not trusting you. For letting control trump family. For thinking anyone with money would use it to claim someone. She covered her face, crying like a mother. Not the family's controller, not the commander. Just a mother who'd been wrong. I feared you'd hurt Daniel, but I was the one pushing you away. I looked at her. My heart didn't open instantly, but it softened like a wound healing over. You know I said my voice gentle as a lullaby. I thought you'd never change. But now, I'm not so sure. Linda grasped my hand once firm, now soft and trembling. Give me a chance. Even just to be a decent grandma. A house can be built from brick and cement, but a home is built from what's broken, then pieced back together by choice. When Daniel first said, let's build our own house, I didn't think it'd happen so fast. Not because I didn't want our own haven, but because I feared I'd make it a hideout instead of a starting point. Yet in a quiet spring, as plum blossoms budded outside our window, we bought a small plot in the northern suburbs. Quiet green, far enough from the city to hear birds at dawn, but close enough for our commutes. We didn't need much: a single-story house, 3 bedrooms, a backyard big enough for Paul to run, and a kitchen warm, compact, with natural light, because I believe all good things start in the kitchen. Building a house wasn't simple. Building a home after a storm was complex in its own way. When the architectural plans were finalized, Linda called unexpectedly. I heard you're building a house, she began. If you don't mind, I could help with interior design. I paused. Honestly, part of me wanted to decline. Interiors shape a living space, and I'd had enough of invaded spaces. But then I recalled 2 women in a hospital holding hands wordlessly. I took a breath. You can help, within limits. I'll send you a list of rooms needing furniture, but Daniel and I make the final call. Linda didn't object, just said I understand. Thank you. We created a group chat, me, Daniel, Linda. Daily, she sent chair or lamp samples, gentle decor ideas, no pushing, no overstepping, just suggestions like a friend with refined taste. I was surprised to find I actually listened. Once she sent a photo of a leather reading chair, dark walnut wood, exactly like my grandmother's old one. She wrote, "This reminds me of your grandma's chair. Might suit that quiet window nook." I ordered it. No further discussion. When the house was done, Paul was thrilled. He ran the backyard like it was his own planet. Daniel planted a young apple tree. I hung mint green wallpaper with tiny bear patterns in Paul's room. Each time I saw him sleep in that sunlit room, I knew we'd chosen the right path. We held a small dinner to celebrate the new house, simple lasagna, warm salad, baked apple pie. Linda arrived early with peonies and a tablecloth she'd embroidered herself. I was taken aback. She'd never sewn, at least not in my mind. My mother taught me as a girl, but I stopped when business took over, she explained as I took the flowers. I thought, it's time to learn again. I didn't know how to respond, just smiled and spread the cloth on the table. Dinner was warmer than I expected. No loud voices, no tough questions, no doubts. Just Paul in the middle mouth, full of pie crumbs, chattering about school. Teacher Emily said I drew the best today, but I didn't tell Max he always steals my crayons. Linda laughed, adding carrots to Paul's plate. Daniel looked at me, his eyes saying, "See, things can be peaceful after all." I didn't reply, but inside I nodded. After dinner, Linda and I cleaned up. No one broached anything too serious, but after washing dishes, she dried her hands, looked at me, voice low. "Emma," I turned, "you're not just a daughter-in-law anymore." I blinked, unsure. She stepped closer, hand on my shoulder. "You're part of my blood. Not just as my grandson's mother, but because you gave me a second chance, something not everyone would do." I stood still, not from shock, but because for a moment I saw myself move from outsider to truly belonging. Sometimes headwinds don't come from strangers, but from those you've let back through the door. That summer began with soft sunlight and ended with a conversation teaching me trust once sprouted can wither if misplaced. One Saturday afternoon, Linda arrived. Paul was napping. I was folding laundry, Daniel tidying his desk. Everything was calm, simple, steady, no hint of storms. Linda walked in her face as light as usual, holding a bag of cinnamon cookies she and Paul often baked on weekends. But after small talk, she sat up, straight eyes on me, tone shifting. "Emma, I need to talk seriously." I stopped folding. Daniel looked up from across the room. We both turned to her. She sighed, her voice, that of the commanding businesswoman I hadn't heard in a while. "The family's transport company is on the brink of bankruptcy. Cash flow's dry partners pulled out, banks cut credit. I need help to restart." The room fell silent, the clock's second hand deafening. I looked at Daniel. He said nothing, waiting for me. I took a breath, keeping my voice steady. "What exactly do you need?" Linda met my eyes. "An initial investment, 200,000. I nodded, unsurprised. Instead of answering, I stood, poured her water, and sat across from her. "I can help, but not without conditions. I can lend with a clear contract, no interest, but with a repayment timeline and commitment." She frowned. "You don't trust me," I replied softly. "I trust you were a great businesswoman. But trust doesn't replace principles. This isn't just family, it's finance." Daniel nodded, adding, "Emma's right. This isn't rejection. It's responsible help. You taught me, don't mix money and feelings." Linda looked at us, her eyes softening briefly, then hardening. "So you still don't see me as family. Everything needs contracts clauses. Always protecting yourself first." I felt the wind shift, not outside, but in our newly built home. I set the glass down, slow. "You're right, you don't need blind trust, but you shouldn't see principles as an insult. If I had no assets, you wouldn't need my help. You know that. So do I." Paul woke at the peak of tension, his voice calling Mommy. "Grandma." Linda and I stood. He ran out, rubbing his eyes, hugging her leg. Linda held him, eyes teary. "My love." "I'm sorry if I made this house sad today." Daniel stepped closer, voice gentle. "Paul want to draw. I've got crayons ready." Paul nodded, retreating to the study with his dad. Linda and I stood in the living room, silence thick. She turned to me, eyes wet, voice small. "You think I came just for money?" I shook my head. "No, you came needing help. And I'm helping in the safest way for both sides. No malice in my words, just boundaries I must keep." Linda looked at me long and hard. Then she walked to the door. "Then I won't take it. I'll find another way. I won't bother you again." I didn't stop her, just nodded slightly. The door closed behind her, confirming once more, when headwinds return, you stand firm not to fight, but to not be swept away. Daniel returned minutes later. "You okay?" I sat, hands folded, slow. "I'm fine, just regretful. For Mom, for hoping. But kindness can't lack principles. I learned that from her." Daniel nodded, squeezing my hand tightly. "Not everyone who weathers a storm learns to love the wind. But with patience, you learn to choose peace, not because everything's perfect, but because you've learned to accept." A year later, our house truly became a home. Paul turned 4, speaking clearly, running fast, sometimes arguing in ways that made Daniel and me laugh. He loved drawing skies and houses with red-tiled roofs, 2 windows and a smoky chimney, like our little home built from a journey of growing trust. The reading nook by the window with Linda's suggested wooden chair became my favorite spot. Mornings with soft sun, I'd sip coffee, look at the garden, and reflect on what had passed not as scratches in memory, but as a film I needed to watch to the end to grasp its meaning. Linda still came Wednesdays, a gentle routine. No longer a central figure or controller, just Paul's grandma. No demands, no conditions. Sometimes she just sat on the porch watching Paul on his toy bike, saying nothing, just smiling. I don't know when Linda changed exactly. Maybe after the stroke, maybe after the investment argument, or maybe in small moments when she realized a heart given rightly is naturally received. I didn't lend her the money that day, and she didn't return to blame me. I think she understood not because I was rigid, but because I held to what I believed kindness can't be a trap for control to return. And strangely, that opened another door between us, one of quiet respect needing little explanation. One rainy afternoon, Paul drew a picture. My family in the rain. He drew himself in the middle, holding Mom and Grandma's hands. Daniel stood behind, holding an umbrella. I looked at it, smiling. "Why's Dad holding the umbrella and you're in the middle?" Paul answered matter-of-factly, "'Cause if I don't hold you two, the rain'll make everyone drift apart." His words stunned me. And in that moment I realized sometimes kids grasp the heart of things faster than adults think. Once Linda brought a small rosemary plant in a ceramic pot. "I know you like these," she said, setting it on the windowsill. I nodded. "Thank you." She started to leave, then stopped looking at me. "Emma, I'm not asking forgiveness. I just hope what you've done for me doesn't hurt you more." I said nothing, but I knew I'd already forgiven, not with words, but by letting her cross this threshold the right way at the right time. Our new home wasn't a perfect blueprint. It had corners off kilter from unexpected changes. But that's why it became a true home, where everyone learned to adjust to stay together. And in that process, I learned more about myself. From a girl guarding assets like a shield, I learned to let go a little to hear others. From thinking forgiveness was weakness, I learned it's strength enough to not need revenge or proof. One evening, I wrote this story not for others, but for me to reread. Every chapter of life, every choice, every confusion, every urge to let go. I recorded as a way to keep the journey I'd traveled. I opened my grandmother's old letter, yellowed, but bold. "Kindness is the greatest legacy." I read it again and again, then framed it in glass, hanging it in the hallway's corner. Below, I wrote in white chalk, "Peace doesn't come on its own. It's what you choose after learning the lesson of hurt." When I finished these last lines, I realized this isn't just my story. It's a journey anyone who's been a daughter-in-law hidden secrets, to protect love or learn to forgive, can find themselves in. This story has no absolute good or total evil. Only people with unhealed wounds, trust rebuilt bit by bit with selective love. I learned peace doesn't come from avoiding clashes, but from facing them with courage and compassion. And sometimes forgiveness isn't for others, but to lighten your own heart. Thank you for joining me to the end of this journey. If this story touched you, please leave a comment with your thoughts and follow the channel. It's fuel to keep telling stories worth telling. See you in the next journey.